Jamni Roy is a preeminent Indian artist who pioneered a folk art vision. His long artistic career spanned an entire era of anti-colonial culture, spilling into modern India. He had a fascination for exploring various stylistic expressions, and at an exhibition, a critic observed that it is characteristic of Jamni Roy, with his catholicity of vision, to create works after Van Gogh or a landscape in the style of Cezanne, a Chinese drawing, or a painting derived from Ajanta with its inspiration. However, it was not this virtuosity, but his compelling modernist vision of folk art that made him a memorable artist at the end of anti-colonial era. Jamni Roy is also considered to be the father of folk art renaissance in India, who created an alternative modern Indian identity. His stylistic expression, which characterizes him and his style, was the simplification of forms. And this simplification of forms he was able to achieve through a slow, deliberate thinking process. He was born in 1887 and he came to Calcutta in 1906 and he joined the Calcutta School of Art under Abanindranath Tagore, where Percy Brown was heading the institution. Percy Brown very soon realized the remarkable talents of Jamni Roy and gave him enough freedom to do what he wanted. Percy Brown also saw in him a maverick personality. Though Jamni Roy belonged to a group of artists of academic realist tradition, he always remained close to Abanindranath Tagore and had the greatest respect for the master. Jamni Roy came to Calcutta from Bankura region in Bengal, and he belonged to a family of minor landed gentry. Bankura region is known for its rich traditions of folk art and terracotta sculpture. At a young age, he had encountered the Santals, the tribals of that region, which were to appear later in his paintings. By 1920s, it was realized that the definition of nationhood had shifted from pan-India to the local, and Jamni Roy's radical expressions of the local Indian were in complete opposition to the pan-Indian historicism of the Bengal school. Now this is where it is very important to mention that why Jamni Roy was attracted to the folk art tradition. He used folk art, as a matter of fact. Through folk art, he wanted to restore the community function of art. And at the same time, in doing so, he denied the artistic individuality which the modern age had bestowed on the artist. After his graduation, he started working on various commissions for portraits, painting landscapes, copying photographs, or doing stage paintings, and he could have had been a very successful artist, commercial artist rather, who could have executed this. But for Jamni Roy, there was an inner search. He was looking for a language that would express not the very weak and the sentimental style of the Orientalists, which Abanindranath Tagore had propagated in his Indian art style, but he was looking for something that would go beyond. So in the 1920s, he actually came across, or rather he fell under the spell of the romantic image of the tribals and painted some very sensual images of the Santal women. These works that he created were robust in character, had healthy, strong lines, and many of his contemporaries found this to be an ideal contrast to the lyricism and emaciated figures of the Bengal school. Around this time, Jamni Roy, that is in the mid-1920s or so, he was close to Abanindranath Tagore. There was a lot of excitement around Kalighat paintings, and also a wide publicity was being given to the paintings of Sunayani Devi, who was the sister of Abanindranath Tagore. and she was painting in a naive, simplified style which she had evolved. And it was this simplification which had actually also drawn him to Sunaini Devi. Uh, at this point, Kalighat paintings attracted Jamni Roy, and he started to paint the Patt paintings which the Kalighat painters were evolving. And he was so adept in copying these that sometimes it became difficult to differentiate between the original and the copy. Kalighat artist Jamni Roy soon rejected because he felt that they had lost their rural ideal by coming to the urban culture of Calcutta and catering to the urban population. Somehow Jamni Roy always felt that Bengal revival cannot happen with Ajanta or Mughal paintings or Rajput paintings. For he said it is easy to copy, it is easy to learn a language, but difficult to enter its inner thoughts. And it was this aspect which led him to go out on a search for folk art traditions of the Patuas in Bengal, which he did. And it was this epic journey in the mid 1920s which led him to the tradition of the Patt painters, where he stayed with them, learned their artistry, hands-on experiences in every way of making the pigments, etc. Jamni Roy's pictorial style could be termed as formalistic. His images of monumental sari-clad women, Madonnas, village dancers, and animals have become iconic. Jamni Roy, in order to maintain the clarity of rhythm, the volume, the decorative aspects, as well as the monumentality of the Patt paintings, when he started it, he resorted to creating monochromatic works. And these monochromatic works soon led to introducing 7 colors in tempera. These 7 colors were Indian yellow, cadmium green, cobalt blue, vermilion, charcoal grey, black and white. He also started using lamp black to make the outline drawings, and also used canvas that was made from homespun fabric. This was to express, or this was to make it known that indigenous expressions cannot be achieved with the imported Winston and Newton oils. This intellectual journey of Jamni Roy, which he had set upon himself, was misunderstood by many of his contemporaries. Stella Kramrisch herself, who had also curated his earlier exhibition in 1930, felt that he was a villager who had returned to the village in his art. Even his close friends, Bishnu Day and John Irwin, felt that he approached folk art not as an outsider, but one who seemed to have an intimate understanding of the living experiences of the people, because that is where the root of the folk culture lay. However, Jamni Roy was experimenting and had created a whole corpus of works, which in 1929 he showed it for the first time. Then in 1930 he held a show at Indian Society of Oriental Art, and this exhibition clearly marked his transition from being a half-hearted Orientalist to a robust primitivist. Now in 1923, Jamni Roy had come across a book by Rabindranath Tagore titled Hermitage, and in that there was one particular sentence which impressed upon him considerably, where Tagore had written that if Indians force themselves to imitate Western civilization, then they will not create a genuine Europe, but rather they would create a distorted India. And on reading this sentence, he said that it validated his feelings, what he had been going through for the past 8 months. Jamni Roy gives reasons as to why he chose folk art as his visual language and why he engaged with the folk art traditions. He says that the artistic purity. In other words, the essential simplicity of form, which at one time was shared by prehistoric or the primitive culture, was now lost because of the spread of anti-colonial culture and was on the decline. He felt that this decline was happening because there was a lack of coherent mythological tradition. But he supported this idea in the Patt tradition of Bengal, where he says that the rich tradition still continues because the most important aspect of the Patt paintings were the non-illusionist pictorial language that still continues in its richness, though much of its vitality had been sapped by colonial culture. He says it continues to be so because it still maintains a coherent, unified mythological stories. And it was this assurance by Jamni Roy which allowed him to go forth. Jamni Roy, first and foremost, was an artist, and his artistry and his representation was equally incisive and insightful. As a man, he was shy, reclusive, somewhat remote, with a slow and deliberate diction, and he always attracted people by his intelligence and clarity of thought. So we find that Jamni Roy, in many respects, started to create works of art that sometimes even went beyond Indian mythological traditions, where he represented Krishna and Radha, or Krishna and Yashoda, and many aspects of Krishna's life, like also Ganesh Janani and many other paintings. But what was strikingly important was that he created a large corpus of works that had Christian iconography. May Casey, who owned many of the works of Jamni Roy, said that he created Christ with a lot of strength, purity, and relentlessness. And she also questioned that how an Orthodox Hindu Brahmin like Jamni Roy could engage with the Christian subject. To which Jamni Roy he had a reply. He said he wanted to paint subjects that were remote to his life experiences, and he felt that human and divine can only be expressed through symbols. And he always felt that the rich sacred art traditions were very rich in its mythological content, and that is why he was very strongly attracted to Byzantine art. Byzantine art, if one should remember, always had this simplicity, where a denaturization had happened after the Greeks' full development of naturally representing the human forms or the world around them, further extended with a lot of realism by the Romans. But under Christianity, since the physical body was not so important and only the soul was important, so the body was, human forms were always represented as emaciated, accentuated, tall, and in de-physical forms. And this is what attracted Jamni Roy, because it was always the simplicity of forms that he was looking for, and it is this simplicity which he had also found in the folk art tradition. He also looked at Western art. He had looked at the works of Picasso and was quite severe on him for engaging with the African tradition, but in a very difficult, distorted way, which he felt. But was attracted to Kandinsky, who was inspired by the Russian folk art tradition, which eventually led to his spirituality in art. And we find that it is through this process of simplification that we find Jamni Roy reaching out to the rich mythical traditions